Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna get underway. The Board of Zoning Appeals is now in session for its regularly scheduled meeting of December the 18th, 2014. I'm Joey Hargis, and I'll be presenting for cases for review in today's public hearing. At this time, I would ask anyone to either silence or put on vibrate your cell phone so as not to disrupt today's meeting. Candidly, you are probably just killing your phone battery anyway because there's not much of a signal in this room at all. So. The procedure will be to introduce the case record as the Codes Department has it, and I'll do it on the wall there by means of a PowerPoint presentation. I'll present any maps, photographs, and sketches of today's cases. Also presented to the board any letters that we've received in support or opposition to a particular case, as well as any correspondence from other metro agencies. At the conclusion of my presentation, the applicant will come first to the table, along with any persons in support. Then after the applicant has a period to speak, the opposition will come next, along with any parties opposed. And then finally, the applicant will have a period for rebuttal. The board and their rules provide applicants in cases without opposition 10 minutes to present their case, or in cases with opposition, the board provides 15 minutes for each side of the case to present their testimony. Again, that's each side, not per person. To the right of where you'll be sitting up front, beside that nice young lady there, is your clock there that you'll see, and we'll keep track of your time for you. There, the clock will run during testimony. It will stop for any questions or answers there too, initiated by the board. Let's see here. All section numbers that I refer to today come directly from the Metropolitan Code of Law, which was adopted by the Metro Council, and the zoning code became effective on January 1st, 1998, and does apply to the entire jurisdiction of Metro government. I'll introduce a copy of the zoning code into the record of the zoning code, and I'll dispense from reading individual sections unless the opposition or applicant requests that I read those sections. The zoning code requires that these proceedings be taped. Therefore, it's imperative anyone wishing to address this board to come forward, have a seat there at the table, turn on your microphone, identify yourself, and then make your presentation. It should be noted that it's found that anyone's presented false or misleading testimony to this board that has affected this board's decision. Any approval can be revoked at a later date by means of a show cause hearing. The board will go through all cases set for public hearing today, and after each case, the board will then discuss and vote on that case in front of you. The board's vested with the power to act on these cases as outlined in Section 1740-180 of the Metro Code of Law. The code requires that 4 members of this 7-member board be present to constitute a quorum. Today, I have 5 members for you, and I am expecting a 6th to arrive briefly. You need 4 affirmative votes from these members to grant your application. In the event that there are only 4 members hear your case and there are not 4 affirmative votes, your application will be reset and re-advertised for the next available public hearing cycle, which we're currently scheduled for February 5th on that case. In the event that 5 or more members hear your case and there are not 4 affirmative votes, your case will remain on our agenda for the next 30 days. We'll have 1 meeting in the next 30 days. That's January the 15th. Applications that fail to receive 4 affirmative votes after that January 15th hearing shall be deemed denied by operation of law. The applicant or any aggrieved property owner may request a rehearing of this board within 60 days of today's public hearing. Further, any applicant or aggrieved property owner may appeal this board's decision to Chancery or Circuit Court within 60 days. But after this 60-day period, all decisions are final and no further action can be taken. If you're an applicant and your case is approved here today, it is necessary for you to follow up with the Codes Department and pick up the permits for which you've applied, or if you have a permit that has been issued, to follow up with the inspector after today's hearing. You've got 2 years from today's date for this board's approval to remain valid. And Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases were filed in proper order. All applicants were notified by certified mail as required by the code. All affected property owners within 300 feet were sent a first-class notice, and a legal ad was published for today's cases. And before we begin, I do have a preliminary announcement on today's agenda. Case 2014-113, Miriam Muhammad, the appellant, and on their property at 5747 Mountain View Road. That case has been withdrawn, so if there are any parties present for case 113 seeking or hearing case 113 today, case 113 will not be heard. That case has been withdrawn. And that's all the preliminaries I have. Mr. Chairman, the board does allow elected officials to address this board should they wish to before the public hearings begin. I do see a council member with us. Councilman, would you like to address this board now? Please come forward and.
Board, thank you for having us today. I'm here to speak on case 2014-115, which is located in my district. The applicant is the Temple Church, and this is one of the largest church congregations in Davidson County. It continues to be a growing congregation, and it's located on Kings Lane, which is one of the main thoroughfares going through the Bordeaux community, northern Bordeaux community. The church has had several occasions where parking has become an issue for the church, and there have also been occasions on record where they have had people parking on the shoulder of the road up Kings Lane, which is only a two-way lane coming off of Clarksville Pike, and it's a very busy area. The church is requesting additional parking with the hopes of in the future maybe some future development, but the request right now in front of you is for additional parking and to be able to pave those spots. And I do support the applicant. I would ask that you give strong consideration to approving their request, and happy holidays. Thank you for your service to our city.
Thank you, Councilman. Okay. Thank you, Councilman, for speaking with us. The board does have a consent agenda, and before I start that, preliminary an additional housekeeping item left over from last time. We did have a case that was tied up on votes. I'll read into the record that case. The public hearing is closed in this case, however, and the case is at the end of page 3. It's our last case on the agenda. Case 2014-104, the Z-Mart is the appellant. Jad Ayesh, owner of the property at 2610 Clarksville Pike. They were requesting variances in the 26th Avenue North street frontage. This board voted on a vote of 5-0 to approve the solid fence variance. The street frontage variance was recommended for approval in a tie vote of 3-2. And I'm asking this time, did either of our members, Ms. Jones or Ms. Chappell, did you watch the record and feel you can participate in this case?
I did not.
Okay. All right. Both.
Sorry,
No, that's okay.
they wanted to phone out?
No, not at all. No, we're fine. So those folks are not eligible to participate in this case. Or any of the 5 members, the gentleman with us, wish to change their vote in case 104.
I want to change my vote from no to yes on one. And there were 2 votes on that case. One was variance on the fence, I believe, which passed.
Yes, sir. That case did pass.
After much study, thought, and research of the record, I want to change my vote to yes on that no vote. So that would be a 4-1 vote on that case number 14104.
Okay. Before we change that vote, are there any other members who participated wish to change their votes? Okay. Mr. Chairman, seeing none, Mr. King, the record will reflect that on this date you change your vote from no to yes, and with that yes vote, this case now has 4 affirmative votes. Case 2014-104 is deemed deemed approved under your rules, and an appropriate order will be entered today. Again, case 2014-104 is approved, and if the applicants are here, you are free to go. That case has been approved today. Okay, now back to our normal course. The board does have a consent agenda, and a board member reviews the record in each case prior to the hearing, and if in their opinion the applicant has met the criteria for the application they've requested, and they feel that testimony in the case would not alter the material facts, they recommend the case to the remaining board members for approval on the consent agenda. I'll now enter into the record those cases that have been recommended by Chairman Whitson. And if anyone is here and present opposed to a case, please raise your hand. The case numbers that I'll call. The case will be removed from consent and heard in its regular order. The first case recommended for the consent agenda is case 2014-114. Ms. Terry Richardson, the appellant, 821 Shelby Avenue. Do you have opposition present? Okay, thank you, sir. We'll pull that from the consent agenda, and we'll hear that actually be the first case that we hear today. The next case recommended for consent, case 2014-115, Temple Baptist Church, 3732 Kings Lane, requesting a special exception to construct a new family life center and expand it of a parking area. I would like the record to reflect that on my agenda I have parcels 115 and 209 included in this case, and cases 115 and 209 are not a part of this request. Any parties present in opposition to case 115? 115. Mr. Chairman, seeing none. For those folks that came in late, I just asked, we had called for opposition on our first case 2014-114. Are either of you in opposition to case 114?
I don't think so.
Okay.
What address?
It is at 821 Shelby Avenue. Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, the case 115 recommended for consent meets all the conditions of the special exception. I will change the record to reflect those two parcels being deleted from the request. Mr. Chairman felt that since it met all the conditions of the special exception, he recommends that case for approval. The next case recommended for approval is case 2014-116, Excelsior Develop LLC. Appellant of the property is located at 1902 Cahal and 1597 Cahal. This is on the corner at Cahal and Rebecca Street, requesting a variance in the Cahal Avenue setback to authorize construction of townhomes on that property. Are there any parties present who are opposed to case 116 there at the intersection of Rebecca and Cahal? Okay, ma'am. We'll pull that from consent. We'll hear it in its regular order. And then finally, case 2014-117, Echo Construction LLC, John Ambrose, the owner of the property at 1811 3rd Avenue North, requesting a variance in the street setback in R6 to allow the legal use of existing townhome. Any parties present in opposition to case 117? Case 117. Hearing none, the exceptional shallowness of the lot is the hardship in the case, and this construction would be in keeping with the existing pattern of development on the street currently, since you'll align it with the other homes on the street. So those cases recommended for the consent agenda by Chairman Whitson are cases 115 and 117.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Got a motion, got a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes.
If you're here for cases 115 and 117, your cases have been granted. You are free to go. We'll call now the applicant in the case Ms. Terry Richardson, to the table. If you'll come forward, ma'am. And have a seat. I'll turn it over to you here in just one moment. Mr. Chairman, if you'll give me just a second to call up her. This is case 2014-114, Terry Richardson, the appellant, TKR Residential Care Home LLC, the owner of the property at 821 Shelby Avenue. She is requesting a special exception in the R8, HPR, and UZO districts to use the existing residence for an adult daycare home for 12 individuals. My agenda says children, but it is for 12 adults at this location. Referred to the board under section 1716-070D 1 through 7, the appellant has alleged board would have jurisdiction under section 1740 180, item D, item C.
Shall I speak?
No, just 1 second, I'm sorry. And correcting my section there, section 1716 170, not 070. The subject property is at the intersection here of South 9th Street and Shelby Avenue. It is in the 8 zoning district. The former use of this property was last permitted by the Codes Department in the early 1980s as a residential boarding care facility. Our zoning code would call that assisted living today, or nursing home would be an equivalent use of this property, and that's the current legal use of the property. The appellant is proposing to change the use from that nursing home or assisted living use over to what the zoning code calls as a daycare home. Daycare homes are different in that it is not 24-hour residency. It would be only allowed from the hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday only, no weekend use. But when you think daycare home, it's typically assumed we're talking about children. That's the vast majority of what this board sees. But the zoning code was written with the term individuals, so it did allow some. At the time we wrote the code in 95, 96, there was the beginnings of daycare uses for adults, for someone to watch mom or dad while you're at work, and you would pick your folks up on the way home like you would your child. So the council at the time left that zoning code definition written that way. And I think this board has probably seen 2 or 3 of those, I guess, since the inception of that. But this is the subject property which you see here from the aerial photograph, a parking area located along the alley, at alley 264, where my cursor is. This is the site plan submitted. You see the structure in the alley there. This is a view of the subject property upon my visit out there and placing the signs and taking photographs. This is a view with Shelby to my back. And then viewing in the upper left photo, this is the property directly across Shelby Avenue, and then rotating counterclockwise along that same intersection. Parcels to the southeast, the parcel directly across South 9th, and then the adjoining parcels along Shelby. And then a view of the parking pad, which you saw on the site plan at the rear of the property at the alley, and then a view along South 9th there. That view in the bottom right looking north. Okay. With that, I'll turn over. Members, we had received a letter from Councilman Peter Westerholm recommending support of the case. We had received also 3 letters in opposition to the case.
Joey,
Sir.
could you, would you mind reminding us of the standard for special exception for daycare that we are finding?
The zoning code requires 2 parts for this board to consider. The first, let me talk more specifically to this particular use. Daycare home is listed in 1716-170D. The specific requirements are listed there, items 1 through 7. It talks about only be permitted as accessory to an occupied residence or other institutional use. The minimum lot size is the same as the principal activity. That one does comply. Daycare homes may have driveway access on any street. However, no more than one daycare home shall locate on a minor local street and not within 100 feet of a dead-end street. Daycares have to be, no daycare center or daycare home shall locate on the same street or block face or opposing block face where the block face is over 1,000 feet. No daycare center shall locate within 1,000 feet of one another, measured from property line to property line. Again, we talked about at the prior hearing on another case, that measurement resets each time you hit a block. So that 1,000 feet starts over. If you'll recall, Councilman from Donaldson was here on a prior case. Play area, if an outdoor play area is provided, it shall be fenced and attached to the structure in a manner which minimizes noise and impacts on the neighboring residences. All requirements of the state must be met. And number 7 says the board can waive above standards if it's part of a multifamily housing development. Those are the specific conditions of special exception. Generally, the general provisions listed in section 1716-150, there are about 9 items on there. I can go through those if you like me to, but you guys may be familiar. Those are the general conditions. They include things such as integrity of adjacent areas, design and architectural compatibility. That would come into play if you were constructing something, traffic impact, natural features, and those are the items probably most pertinent to today.
And Joey, are we able, you said the code said individuals, not adults or children. And in cases like this, are we able to say this is specifically for adults?
I think you could condition that. I think it's reasonable that you could do so.
Okay. Yeah, just.
Okay, with that'll turn over the record as the Codes Department has it. Ma'am, if you would please identify yourself and make your presentation to this board along with you, sir. And to your right is the clock that will keep time. Should you wish to have a rebuttal after opposition speaks, what remains will be the time that you'll have to address their concerns. And I'll turn it over to you at this time.
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Richardson, and I'm owner of TKR Residential Care Home. I started out as a Homes for the Aged back in 1995. 10 years later, I turned into a supportive living. Basically, what we are a service that provides care for the disabled, elderly, and mentally challenged population. Basically today, I am requesting a license for an adult day service where our focus is, we're following the social model where we're basically trying to provide services for the same population through maintaining health through recreational and social activities as well as nutritional meals. This service, I'm hoping, will be provided 5 days a week. Approximately 10 to 12 hours. We will provide non-medical supervision for families that are in need. My main goal is to provide a quality of life for the elderly and disabled population while helping families in need of supervision during the daytime and help them to keep their loved ones at home. That's basically all I have to say.
My name is Reverend Dr. Donald Smith. I'm associated with the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church, where the Reverend Keller is the senior pastor. I'm an associate minister, and I'm here to just support the appellant, Mrs. Richardson. I believe if the adult day care is provided, is approved, it will provide additional options for the elderly and other clientele in participating in structured activities in a safe and caring environment under guarded supervision. Among the many benefits of the community, I feel that it will add to the quality of life provided by the community. And parents will have the option of dropping off their parents, their elderly parents, and other loved ones in a secured establishment where daily organized and constructed programs will be provided for both male and female. And finally, I just want to say that in the 12 to 13 years that I've known Ms. Richardson, I observed her in caring for her current clientele. And 2 things come to mind, and that is integrity and dignity. She treats her current client with dignity and respect, and she operates her business with a great deal of integrity. And I feel that if she is approved for this daycare, that she will continue to operate under the same capacity. And so therefore, I fully or wholeheartedly give my support for this daycare, adult daycare. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm over here. Can I just ask a couple of questions? You're running a 24-hour service now. How many people do you have staying there at the moment?
Right now, I have 10. I have the capacity for 18, fully sprinkled. Off and on since I started 20 years ago, we've had 12 to 16, 17, 18 people. Basically, what we do is cooking, cleaning, making sure they have indoor, outdoor activities, making sure that, that they're getting the help that they need medically and things of that nature. So they live there. It is their home.
So potentially you're lowering
I'm
both
just
the number of
downsizing.
people and the number of hours.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure I got all that. How many are you,
I'm licensed for 18.
right?
Okay. Right now, I have, I think, about 10 living there. The numbers are up and down over the
Right.
last 20 years. Basically, I'm just downsizing. I've been doing it for 20 years, whereas I believe in quality of life for my clients. I need quality of life for myself as well. But I want to continue to do what I love, just, less hours.
So what will the new capacity be, 18?
No, it's
Or-
12.
Okay, I'm sorry, there's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, and are they all adults or,
They're all adults, generally 55 and older.
and you said 10 to 12 hours a day. Do you have specific hours in mind?
I'm looking for maybe 7:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. that would allow people to drop them off before work and pick them up afterward.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any further questions?
I'm sorry, I did have one more. How many staff do you have? Is it just you or?
No, I have one full-time person, and I live there as well, so I'm there most of the time.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, ma'am, you may want to save your 11 minutes and 11 seconds for rebuttal.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the opposition can come forward.
Good afternoon. My name's Charles Walker, and I'm here in opposition. I own the properties at 816 Shelby, 818 Shelby, and 811 Sullivan, which would be across the alley behind Shelby on the other side of the street. 816 and 818 Shelby would be immediately. Oh, sure. Sorry. Okay. 816 and 818 Shelby would be immediately across the street, adjacent to the house that was shown in the picture. One of the lots is used as a parking lot for a church. The 818 would be the church building. So on the map, that would be the second and third lots located next to the houses across Shelby Avenue. Okay. That's correct. And then 811 Sullivan would be on the alleyway behind that, right across from the park. And my concerns is that, number one, traffic over there has become an issue with the new development, and the new development in the area has been great for the neighborhood. It has people moving in, wanting to move in over there. We've made significant investments in the neighborhood in reliance on the residential character of the neighborhood. Other investors have too, and an example of that would be what's at 821 Shelby Avenue, which is directly across the street from this establishment. Those developments have gone over well, and the prices for those new developments are in the mid-400s, which is a significant increase over where Shelby Avenue was just 5 years ago. We're in opposition to any change. The traffic that would be created by people coming in the mornings and afternoons would already add to the congestion where it's almost impossible to make a left turn on 8th or 9th now during any of those hours in the morning congestion or afternoon rush hour. The parking is limited on the parallel parking on the street on Shelby. Don't believe there's any spaces on the side, and they have a parking area in the back for, and I'm just counting from what I see, for looks like 4 cars. So I don't think it allows for an adequate flow of traffic coming in to drop that number of people off and pick that number of people up. And so I'm opposed.
You say you own 3 pieces of property over there?
Correct.
And 2 are empty lots?
One is an empty lot.
And then one's a church. And then what's the third one?
The third one's a single-family residence.
A single family. So you talked a lot about traffic, but how does this really impact you personally or the use of your, I'm assuming the church meets on Sunday and maybe a night a week or something like that too. How would this development impact the 3 lots that you own for their use?
Well, I have tenants in that at the church, of course, and they have their own parking areas. Over on Sullivan, which would be immediately behind that, they only have the driveway. So they use the parallel parking on the street.
Who is they?
The tenants.
Oh, your tenants, okay.
Tenants. So I'm over there some. When I go over there, the traffic's congested. It's hard to find a parking space. There's 3 homes on one lot, which is at 821 Shelby, directly across the street. Not any parallel parking spaces when I'm over there are available on that street. So if you went across, if you were at the stop sign at 9th and you crossed over Shelby to where this development would be at, all those spaces are filled. There's three homes on that lot, and I don't believe one of them even has a driveway.
The applicant had said, you heard her, that this is kind of downsizing for her for the number of people. So is this worse than what currently would be over there, what she's proposed?
Well, the way I understood it, currently the people who are there 24/7. They don't come and go during the day. That's my understanding. And what they're proposing now would be a daycare where somebody's dropping people off in the morning and picking them up in the afternoon. So now you've got basically 24 people or up to 24 coming and going a day to that location.
Okay.
And I don't know that I'm just 4 parking spaces. I'm not sure they're going to be using other people's parking, and personally,
But it's not other people's parking if it's on the street.
Correct.
And there are requirements for on-site parking, I would imagine, for this use. And if there's not, and she has 4 or 5, which we can clarify.
There are actually 6 spaces.
There's 6 spaces.
Okay, so I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that when we talk about, it's more parking than traffic, if I'm hearing what you're saying, right? Because 12 trips in the morning, I bet 12 cars drive by there in 6 minutes at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm assuming you're talking parking and not just traffic specifically.
No, I'm speaking about both, actually. And I don't know that one outweighs the other, in my opinion.
So I don't know what time of day this photograph was taken, but there's parking on both sides of 9th. And there's 2 cars. And I live in the neighborhood and I drive by there quite a bit, and I don't see 9th parked up. So I'm just curious about that. There might not be a parking space in front of the address you're going to. I understand that, but
if I may respond, I'm not sure what time of day that video's taken, either photograph. It doesn't seem like Shelby Avenue has that much traffic down it, so I would assume that's in one of the less congested times.
Did you go to the neighborhood meeting or talk to the council person or talk to the applicant about this?
No, I have not. All I have received is the notice, and then a letter from the applicant about the use that they proposed.
Is there a number of, she's talking about 12 people. Is there a number that would make you more happy or less concerned about parking?
No, I'm opposed to the rezoning, period.
Well,
I don't think
she's
that
not being rezoned.
even allowing the additional use, you're going to have an increased amount of traffic coming into the neighborhood from it.
Okay.
If it stays the way it is, there's no increase.
Any other questions? Okay. Applicant, would you like to come back up?
I'm sorry. I was a little confused because I'm thinking that if you, on the corner of 9th, our building, if he's talking about 8, we have 6 parking spaces. I'm the only one that has a car. My clients, none of them have cars. Generally, I've been there 20 years. There's very little traffic, and if there's anyone parking, there's the 2 sides going up and down 9th. But that's only if someone may have something occasionally. But there's not any parking, any trouble with parking. My clients don't have
So
parking.
how do people get there? They get dropped off and picked up every day now?
Right now, you have to understand I'm a supportive living.
Right, but in the
there's
future,
yeah,
they
but
will
in the
be-
future, most of them would be dropped off.
Okay.
And I do have 6 parking spaces, and generally, for the last 20 years, my car, unless someone comes to see their relative, it's the only car that's out there.
And by the nature of the clientele that you deal with, they probably
They
can't
will not be
drive.
driving. Yeah.
Just for the public record, I mean, because I want the public to have access to everything we do, both the Planning Commission and the councilman are, well, Planning Commission has approved your request, and the commission, the councilman has voiced their support. And I'd like to, too, because this is a growing segment of the population that needs assistance, and there's
Yes.
really not adequate assistance at this point. So the service you're providing is a very valuable one,
Thank
and I
you.
just wanted to say that out loud.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do we have any other questions, or? Okay, then I'm going to move to close the public hearing. Discussion?
You just said it all to me.
And me as well, and I believe I'm full support of this.
Okay. Okay, then I'm going to make a motion that because the application meets all the requirements of MCL 17.16.150 and the more specific requirements of 170, that we approve this application.
So we want to put the caveat on this for adult only, not a children.
This
Not a
facility
daycare
for
children.
adults.
Over the age of 18 and over.
Okay, that's fine by me. So over the age of 18?
18 and over.
Oh, yes, yes.
I'll second.
And I just want to, if we're in discussion, I'm assuming that was acceptable. I didn't know if in the future if there were ever a 16-year-old special needs person or something like that.
It's
But you maintain it's elderly.
18 and older.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, so we've got a motion, we've got a second. Any, all in favor? Any opposed? Passes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Board adopts on a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You all feel free to drop by anytime. We have an open door policy. Thank you.
Okay, the board will call the next case, case 2014-116. Before I start, who had the second on that motion? The second, thank you, Mr. Taylor. I appreciate that. I wrote David, and that was my problem. I have 3 Davids. Yeah, that was a good case 2014-116, Excelsior Development appellant and owner of the property at 1902 Cahal and 1597 Rebecca Street, requesting a variance in the Cahal setback in R6 to authorize the construction of a 2-unit townhome, referred to the board under section 1712-030. The applicant has alleged jurisdiction. Applicant's present and opposition is present. We'll get started. I'll turn over, let me go through my portions first, and Sir, I'll turn it over to you and Madam after him. The subject parcel is the property which you see here at the intersection of Rebecca Street and Cahal Avenue. It is in the R6 zoning district. That purple line which you see is the impetus of this variance. That purple line designates Cahal as a collector street, so the minimum street setback for this property will be 20 feet off of Cahal because it's a collector. The zoning code actually allows corner lots such as this to reduce the side street setback in half in the event of where the front door would face the shorter lot line, which would be Rebecca Street. You could reduce the setback on Cahal. He's actually exercising that. The minimum setback there is 40-foot minimum off of Cahal. So that reduction of 20 down from 20 feet is the reduction. The applicant is seeking 10 feet, and this would be the 10-foot setback proposed here. Were Cahal to be a local street like Rebecca, that setback actually would be 10 feet, and our office would issue.
Joey, can you explain to us the difference between a local, a connector street, and all these other things?
Local streets are your typical neighborhood streets in neighborhoods. That is where the vast majority of the population resides. Collector streets are the streets that channel that traffic from those smaller streets toward the arterials such as Gallatin Pike and Murfreesboro Road. Those are arterial streets. So the collector's job is to funnel that traffic from the back roads over to the main highway.
And it all comes down to how many cars use the street and how.
It is. Those designations are assigned by the traffic engineers, both at Public Works and Metro Planning MPO staff. Do trip counts from time to time throughout the year and sort of track how much traffic runs down these streets and updates the maps accordingly.
So the standards and the setbacks are different for those types of streets?
They are. The setbacks are generally greater along collector and arterial streets than local streets for residential uses. The subject property, again, the site plan does show 2 more units. Those 2 units on the north side are not at issue. They conform in every way to the zoning code. At issue before this board are these 2 structures here, where my cursor's done. This is the subject property. This is at the intersection of Rebecca and Cahal. Cahal's on the right-hand side, east and west this way. This is the subject lot in question. And then views of the adjoining properties, first to the north, the vacant lot, which would be the other half of this development, which you saw, and then the residences along Rebecca Street. Across Rebecca is City Park, which is here. And then coming, looking across Cahal toward the southwest, this apartment complex, which you see there. I think I'll leave that that slide up. With that, looking through the file, we have received a letter in support from Councilman Anthony Davis for the record here, and I received no other correspondence from any parties on this case, this matter. With that, I'll turn the case over to you, sir. You'll have 15 minutes to present your case. You saw the prior case, so exact same similar rules. If you'll hit the button there in front of you, turn your microphone on, and I'll turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Joey. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kevin White, and I own the subject property in question. I purchased this property in 2008, so I've owned this property for the last 6 years. There was a house that sat on this property. This property consists of 2 lots. It's 1597 and 1601, and the house actually crossed the lot line on those, but the one we're here today about is 1597. As you can see from the photos, the house has been raised. We did that a few weeks ago. This house was, as the councilman's letter states, was old, just an old dilapidated house that had been there for years, and I had used it as a rental from the time that I owned it. When I first purchased this property, I purchased it knowing that it was composed of 2 lots and knowing the possibility was there of being able to build 2 houses on each of those lots based on the zoning. I brought a couple of printouts from Metro Maps. I ran some extra copies. I'd be glad to provide some of these to you. The maps that Metro has show this property in question, the width of that property. They show it as 59.5 feet wide. So when I purchased this property, I didn't have a survey done because I had no intention of developing it at that time. I was under the impression that the maps were correct and this property was 59 feet wide. I have two different maps here that show the property is 59.5 feet wide. However, when I had this property surveyed, oh yes, absolutely. Let me make sure I think I have them collated. When I had this property surveyed, I found out that that lot was actually only 38 feet wide. So at some point in time, Metro came through and widened Cahal Avenue, which I believe used to be Lee Avenue. They came through and widened that, took 20 feet of what is now my property, and there was no record of it. I went down to see Joey, and he and I spent probably a good hour in his office going back through the deeds, trying to locate, and I forget how far back we went. I want to say it was either the 60s or 70s, trying to locate any kind of record of when this happened, and there's none available. So hence the hardship of believing that this property was 59 feet wide, and then the surveyor calling me and telling me, oh, by the way, you only have 38 feet on this lot, which with a 20-foot setback on the Cahal side and then a 5-foot setback on the upper side, that only leaves me a 13-foot wide building envelope, which it's, with the new rules that have passed in Metro, the 1.5 times height versus the width, it's a little difficult to build a house that's only 13 feet wide because I'm limited to one story. That would be difficult even if I could go 2 stories, but it's next to impossible to build 2 units on that. And as you can see with the site plan in front of me, my proposal is to build 2 units, one behind the other, detached units on that property. And I don't have the architectural plans selected yet because that would be getting ahead of myself before, I were to get this approval. But my intention is to build more of a craftsman style, sort of a traditional, what you would typically see in the older neighborhoods of East Nashville. That's my intention, to build all 4 of these homes in that style, because I think that will add value to the neighborhood and will improve the value of that corner vastly. And it's just my personal preference on architectural style. I'm not real big on the modern, the real boxy modern looking styles that are real popular now. I'm more of a traditional type of a person. So I guess with that, I don't really have anything else unless there's any questions I can entertain.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So are you dealing with an existing curb cut on Rebecca, or is this where you're proposing the curb cut? What I'm getting around to is, are you saying you can't rearrange the arrangement of these footprints?
That's correct. There is no way to rearrange them because they have to face Rebecca, and Rebecca has no curb. Is that Joey had the photo up there before? It's just a pavement that dead ends into grass. There's a sidewalk and curb on Cahal, but there is no other way to rearrange those homes. They have to sit like they are.
And why is that?
It's because of the setbacks and the zoning. It requires the one property to face Rebecca. Both of those, because see the lots front Rebecca and not Cahal. Cahal is actually the side of the 1597 lot.
Yep.
So the front home has to face Rebecca, and then the other home, the one toward the back, it's also going to have to face Rebecca, because to turn it would make it impossible to build it with any kind of floor plan that would work.
So I'm having a hard time seeing this on this drawing, but so you're saying that there's a property line between the houses?
Yes. Yes, sir. It's Mr. Harper, it's right there, that line.
And what are the setback requirements on that one?
5 feet off this line and 20 off this back property line here.
And so the 5 feet is what you're showing?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. There's 5 feet on the drawing there.
Mr. Harper, the zoning code requires on lots of unequal length that the front of the structure must face the shorter lot line.
Right.
It gives one exception there too, predominant pattern of development, but obviously all those face Rebecca too, so there's not an opportunity to flip them like you might have in another block face.
So maybe this is another silly question, but why not get the variance on the, I'll call it the back property line, the property line that's roughly parallel with Cahal?
Yeah, that was my question too. Why not ask for a zero foot variance on between the two properties, and then that would give you 15 of the 20 feet. It would be a less invasive variance on Cahal.
It would, but so you're saying have a zero setback, so eliminate the 5 foot setback on the upper line. Am I correct? That would still only allow me an 18-foot wide structure.
No, I'm saying that you would have. I'm saying you're asking for 10 feet on Cahal. I'm saying you take, instead of 10 feet on Cahal, take 5 feet on Cahal, 5 feet on the back. You got your 10 feet, but it just pushes your. It's a little more.
Okay, I got you.
Respectful of the Cahal variance. Not only respectful in that you're disrespecting the. You know what I'm saying? You just.
Sure, I understand.
We're trying to. If the code says 20 and there's a good reason to decrease that, well, what's the minimum impact if you're able to do that with the project you're proposing? The part of the issue you've got is that each lot is zoned for a duplex. You want to put 4 on this big lot, and so you're trying to finagle it that way to make sure that.
He does have a building code issue if you get inside of 3 feet of a property line, because one thing we cannot allow is him to eliminate the property line at all, because he's not zoned for that. But if you get inside of 3 feet of the property line, there can be no windows or any openings, and would also need to fire rate that wall along the north property line. So sliding to 0, he'd need.
So 3 feet. He would slide to 3 feet if you were going
to avoid a building and fire code appeal.
My brilliant idea only got you 2 feet, and it's probably not worth talking about it anymore. All right. Not so brilliant.
No, it's okay. I mean, you weren't necessarily aware of the building and fire code side of it, which we do every day. So.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, perhaps we could hear from the opposition, and you'll have 9 minutes and 10 seconds for rebuttal, should you so choose.
Okay, thank you.
Miss, if you'll come forward to the table.
Good afternoon. My name is Becky Swanson Hyman, and I live on Rebecca. I've lived on Rebecca since 1962. I'm very well familiar with the property that he speaks of. As a matter of fact, when he was speaking in terms of the sidewalk that had been taken there, my recollection of that was the street was much wider because, again, I grew up there. So, again, I'm very well familiar with that. The street was much wider. The house that he spoke of as being very old and dilapidated, the I don't know about the interior of the house since I had last been in the house, but it was owned by the Skings. That house was originally built around 1870, I believe it was. And the Bridgewaters and the Skings, let me correct that. And with his speaking of the dilapidation, the property from the exterior was not in the condition that he spoke as if it were. I do not agree with his being allowed to construct, now my understanding is 4 duplexes. Originally, I thought it was 2 townhomes. And what I mean by 2 townhomes is as if a two-story home for one family and a second two-story home for another family. But my understanding now, we're looking at 4 separate residents, and correct me if I'm wrong on this new understanding, and maybe I misunderstood the letter that I received in mail. Maybe I misunderstood the letter that I received in mail.
Yes, ma'am, over here to your left. I think you have perhaps the 2 units, what you have here, the names are interchangeable. A duplex is defined not only like you think of a traditional duplex, 2 units in a single structure.
Yes.
But the zoning code also allows those to be separated into individual structures. So the townhome is just a means of ownership, meaning they could either be rental or sold. But what you'll have there, and the census actually confuses it even more and classifies those as single-family residences. So what you see on the plan there, the 2 structures to the north of the site aren't before this board. Those can be constructed now, and that is a duplex under the zoning code, but they'll probably be constructed, and he can address this on rebuttal, as what's known as a horizontal property regime or a townhome regime where they're sold individually. So like that owner owns the dirt, the structure, and the dirt it sits on, and they together own the remaining property together. But it is by definition a duplex. That townhome is just a means of ownership in it. So it could be rental, it could be for sale, and it may be something he might want to address coming back on rebuttal. But it's as far as what's on that particular lot on the corner is no more than 2 residences on that. I hope that clarified for you a little bit.
It does. Thank you. I appreciate that. But with what I believe is it needs to be consistent with the other homes that are on the street. He wants it set back from my understanding, and it simply needs to be consistent with the other homes on the street. He said that he did not have the property surveyed prior to his making this decision. And in my opinion, that was negligence on his part, because otherwise he would have known what he would be up against in not having adequate space to do what he has planned. As a longtime resident of East Nashville, and of course of Rebecca, I have watched developers come in, and some of the improvements that are classified as improvements, some have been a positive thing, but I've watched them tear down homes and to construct structures that do not fit in with the make of the neighborhood. No, I am not pleased with what he desired to do. And I only have a small voice in what he is proposing to do. Because when I look at the 300 feet, there are just a couple of homes, really and truly, that are involved in that. And my home being one of those homes. Again, he simply needs to keep everything as consistent as possible with keeping some type of uniformity in the neighborhood, and with the structures that he is proposing to construct does not do that. I don't feel that he is looking at the neighborhood and the residents there, the bottom line comes down to dollar signs. So I am asking you to not approve his request.
Any questions?
You've said you lived here on Rebecca Street for over 50 years, so if he were to build it as proposed, how does that affect your property and the use of your property?
It does not per se affect my property because when, as a youngster growing up on Rebecca, it was Rebecca Avenue. And the next thing I know now, it's called Rebecca Street. And so I don't know how that ever came into being. But it doesn't affect my property per se, but it does affect the uniformity, in my opinion, the uniformity of the street. There are two sets of duplexes up the street. And with what he is proposing to construct will be, in my mind, and I have not seen any type of drawings of what he wants to do. I haven't seen anything of that nature. But in my mind, I am seeing these buildings that are towering over everybody else's homes. That's the picture, the mental picture that I have. This structure is going to be towering over the homes that are there. That the Matthews home that is across behind Branch Street on the alley, because there is an alley that runs up the back of those homes on Rebecca. It dead ends at 1613 is where that alley dead ends, if I'm not mistaken. Because Miss Rebecca and Miss Margaret, who lives the last two houses on Rebecca, and then it's Moore Street. I don't think the alley goes to their property line. I think it dead ends at 1613. And that alley has been there since as long as I've known. And at one time, it was used on a regular basis. It has overgrown now. But at one time, we used it on a very regular basis. Even when I had my own home built there at 1611, we had used the alley on a regular basis.
I have one question for you, and I think this is just for clarification.
Yes,
for
ma'am.
you. Do you understand that according to the zoning that's allowed in that area, that he is allowed to build these homes? What he's really asking for is for a setback from the street. Those two homes can be built on that property by virtue of the way the zoning is set up. So
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
allowable. And we don't get to decide on design. That's left for other people to decide. So I want you to understand that whatever decision we make today isn't taking into consideration your concerns, but we have to look at what's allowable under the zoning law, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And from my understanding is he is asking for the property to be able, where it does not fall in line with the other properties on the street. And I am, go ahead, please. You were getting
I
ready
just
to
took a
say
breath because I have a
something.
cold, so I'm having to mouth breathe.
Oh, I'm
I wasn't
sorry.
going to start talking. I just had to breathe.
But with that being said, I feel like the property he wants to construct, then it needs to fall in line with all the other houses, what few houses there are on the street, because there are not very many. Then his structures need to fall in line with them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Then we're going to, I've forgotten the time, but it was like 9 minutes for rebuttal.
Joey, could you bring the aerial back up, please?
I can blow that up a little bit if you need me to.
That would be great, Joey.
I would like to address a few points that the lady mentioned. The home that was on this property, it was a dilapidated home by anybody's standards, and I don't have them in presentation format, but I have plenty of pictures that would be able to prove that. My intent with raising that home and constructing these homes is not to build some monstrosity that's going to tower over the things around it. I agree with her that a lot of the development that's gone on in this neighborhood is not that attractive. I would agree with her. And I think maybe she's, probably meaning more of the modern style that just doesn't fit in. And I completely agree with that. And that's why I do not want to construct a modern style home. And I know that's, neither here nor there for the purposes of this meeting, but just as a background, I believe constructing these homes will, in fact, increase her property value. The tax appraisal on this property as it sits is somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000, the two lots combined. Once these structures are constructed, that tax appraisal is going to be somewhere around the neighborhood of $1 million total for all of them. That doesn't deter or deteriorate the neighborhood. That brings up the neighborhood and helps the neighborhood. Anytime you improve the tax base, that's going to help the neighborhood. As she said, the alley behind this house is overgrown and impassable. It's undeveloped, so it's unusable. So there will be no traffic on that alley. I have no intentions of developing that alley, and I don't know that Metro does.
Is it an abandoned alley, or is it just overgrown?
I think it's a private alley, meaning that, I'm sorry.
It actually, up to this point where my cursor is, it's listed as Alley 2049. It's actually a public alley from that point here to hitting Cahal. It's just either undeveloped or overgrown. But it is a public alley.
So the city of Nashville will be responsible for
this
the upkeep
portion of the
that.
right-of-way does still exist on the maps, as well as this right 90-degree turn here that runs over to Branch Street. Whereas it looks like at some point in the past, the alley continued north and it was closed at some point in the past. You see how those property lines look different.
And to speak to what she brought up about towering over, that's part of the reason why Metro passed the 1.5 times height versus the width, is because that was an issue in places where people were building 3-story homes that were very narrow. That's not going to be the case here. The home to the north of this is a 2-story home, and this property slopes downhill toward Cahal. So the buildings that I will construct will be lower in elevation. I guess you consider that a 1.5 story, but it's it has an upper level window. They'll be lower in elevation than that home. So when you look at it across the horizon line, there's not going to be that much difference in height. And she also made the point that what I was doing didn't conform to the street. As far as setbacks go, the setback on Rebecca is not the issue. The setback on Cahal is the issue. The setback on Rebecca that we have is like 32.5 feet, which is an average of the 4 homes that are to the north of it, which is what I'm required to do and what we're doing. So that does, in fact, conform to the street. So as you look up Rebecca, all the houses, including the proposed homes, will all be relatively in line with each other. So they will conform in that respect. That's really all I have, unless anyone else has any questions.
I was curious, you may have said this already, but where in the process did you realize that the 20 feet was missing?
Not until a few months ago. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a point I wanted to answer also. Like I said, I've owned this property for 6 years. When I bought this property, I just bought it knowing that I had the option possibly at some point to construct houses upon it, to raise this house and construct new houses upon it. if I surveyed every property that I bought to hold as a rental with the proposition that maybe I'll do something with it 5 or 6 years down the road, I mean, I'd spend a ton of money because a survey's not cheap. So it would be cost prohibitive to do something like that. So that's the reason I didn't survey this property when I purchased it. I looked at the Metro maps, saw that, they said 59 feet. I thought I was all right. If I ever wanted to do anything with it in the future, it would be fine. So, that's totally my responsibility that was the case, but that wasn't easy for me to foresee without spending a lot of money, not knowing whether or not I was in fact going to buy the property anyway.
Well, it might not be cheap, but as a developer, wouldn't that be smart?
Well, it would be, but again, this property was bought 6 years ago, and I've held it as a rental ever since. I didn't buy this property in the mindset of I'm gonna go in here and build 4 homes and sell them and make a bunch of money. I didn't really buy it in the developer mindset. I bought it more as a rental with the kind of the option of thinking, if I want to do that, then I can at some point in the future. And now I've decided, okay, that's a good idea because of what's going on over there in that area. That area was not being developed like it is when I bought this property 6 years ago.
So what are your options if you don't get a variance?
I don't really have a lot of good options. I would basically be limited to building a 1-story structure, little shotgun structure, 13 feet wide, and putting 2 of those end to end, just large enough to meet the minimum building requirements, which is not something that I want to do. But I can't lose my ability to build something on this because, having already owned the property for these many years, I've put a lot of money into that property just to keep that house livable because it literally was falling down. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars just to keep a renter in that house. And I can't, I just can't not build something on that lot. So without this approval, then to answer your question, I would be forced to just build a 1-story structure, little shotgun structure that's 13 feet wide and build 2 of those end to end, basically.
But don't you own 2 properties there?
Yes, sir.
Properties?
Yes, sir. There's 2 lots there that sit side by side.
And there's no creativity that you can do to take advantage of the fact that you got all that property there? Not all that property.
No, there is none, because if I replat that property, that's the only way that I would be able to do anything different from the little shotgun structures without this variance. And if I replat it, then the R6 zoning disappears, and then there can only be 1 house built per lot.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, if not, I'm going to move to close the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Discussion?
So this is a matter of hardship, and I don't know. I really have a hard time seeing that as a hardship. I mean, I see it as an extreme, unfortunate inconvenience, but it sounds like a due diligence problem. And I don't know. That's sort of where I am on it.
We had a similar, or a case a few years ago where there was a street widened and it took the frontage of one particular house. I don't know if you remember that one, Chris, and they argued because the lot was less than the others, that this was the only way they could build it. The question is what you all were raising about, well, shouldn't you have known, or, big difference between 38 feet and 58 feet.
We've had a lot of those where, I think even last time there was a East Nashville house that there used to be a house there and there wasn't a house there, and, we voted that because of the shape of the lot. And then we've had some over in 12 South where I think the lot was 20 feet wide, but it was on the map at 20 feet wide. It actually was 20 feet wide, and they wanted, to build a little, either had to build an 8-foot house or something, or they couldn't build anything. And we said, well, no, that was obvious. You knew because it's on the map, and this is a little bit of a different case, I think, that, and I guess the thing that that concerns me is when we have cases like this on collector streets, then what does that do for the ability for the collector street to expand, or the safety of the home, or what impact does it have? And I don't know how a lot of times the property line is a lot further from the street than we think. So I don't really know how far that is, but that's the only kind of concern I have about it.
I will say, and I want to be clear here, I'm actually not sympathetic at all to the fact that he missed it in his diligence. That's not a driving thought for me in the least. But I do think a narrow lot is a hardship. I mean, we find that all the time. And so I do think 38 feet can be found a hardship if the board wants it to. The diligence is on him. I really, whether Metro's map said it or not, I don't, that's not an issue for me. And so I kind of get down to, if it can be a hardship, is it better to have a 13-foot house and preserve a 20-foot setback, or is it better to have a house that's more in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood and a 10-foot setback? And I'm not going to claim there's any right answer on that. I can be persuaded either way. But I do think there can be a hardship if the board so chooses.
Well, it's a hardship only if it is preventing him from using his property. What this particular shape lot is preventing is from him to do what it is he wants to do, or what he thought he could do. So, again, I was a little unclear. He said a few months ago, but at some point he did go ahead and do a survey, and the error was found. So it's not like the property is unusable. It's just not desirable. He had a property with, dilapidated or otherwise. It's either in horrible shape or it wasn't. I don't know. But it was usable for what he bought it for. So that error, in my mind, it's not a hardship because it's preventing him from using the property. It's preventing him from doing what he wants with the property.
All right, I'm going to take the developer side of this discussion, and I'm going to say this. Given the fact that this was a house basically straddling two pieces of property and bought at the time, we are sounding like we're playing a little bit of 20/20 hindsight armchair quarterbacks in the fact of what his due diligence must have looked like. When you buy a piece of property that basically covers one piece of property, you've got a rental house there, you're not going to pull in a surveyor to do that until you do develop the property. And I think anybody that's in the industry understands that. I feel like we're holding him to a standard that is outside the typical industry standard, and I don't think that is exactly fair. I do feel like it's a hardship because of that, and the fact that the property straddled the property line, the house straddled the property line, there's no reason for him to inclination to go look at that. So I think holding him to a standard that is not equitable across the board is an unfair standard. And that's, my opinion. But at this point, he is sitting in a position that if he had the opportunity to replat the property and to make them equitable sizes in order to reach this ability, he then loses the zoning opportunity as well. So therein lies the second hardship. That even to get this, he owns both pieces of property, should have every right to go replat it, but then he loses the opportunity that he would have had. So I think he's blocked by both sides of the zoning situation. And I think therein lies a lot of the hardship. And to me, I think holding him to a standard that you wouldn't hold any other person that bought a piece of property with a house sitting in the middle of it is wholly unfair.
Well, in my opinion, it's not unfair because he didn't buy it to develop it. He bought it for rental property, as he said. And when he decided to develop it, he did do his due diligence. And when he did his due diligence, he found out he couldn't do what he thought he could do. Therefore, not a hardship, an inconvenience.
I tend to agree with Chris that this board, very oftenly gives out variances because of the narrowness of a lot or the shape of the property, and that's what we have here, and we have a city that basically took off this, obviously before he bought it, but nonetheless, that's why this lot is in this condition that it is right now, that if it weren't for the city widening the street, they would have been able to build as he wants today.
Well, I tend to agree, except I think we all know how hot Nashville is and East Nashville is.
I hadn't heard of that. Really?
Where'd you hear that?
That's what I'm hearing.
We're a hot city.
So my concern is that taking advantage of a neighborhood and trying to overbuild a lot, that's kind of what I see. Or overbuild a property, let me rephrase that statement. So I don't know that I could support.
I have heard two well-articulated positions. So does somebody have a motion? At the risk of losing the vote but moving the ball along, I am going to make a motion that we grant the variance based on the hardship that there is a narrow lot, which is 38 feet, and builds that's my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion, got a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll need to raise hands. Aye. Okay, we've got 4 for, and 3 against, so it passes. Not perfect, but done. Merry Christmas to everyone.
With that, the Board of Zoning Appeals is adjourned for the day. Thank you. Guys, for y'all.